Alright, so I'm doing another little video here on once you have the Visual Studio installed, how do you go ahead and get into it, and how do you set it up to write your first program. Okay, so I have gone to my start menu. I don't have this on the camera here, but I'm going to my start menu, and I am finding, I have to go all the way down to the bottom for Visual Studio 2019. Okay, I'm actually going to, before I do this, I'm going to right click on it, and then in the menu structure there where it says pin to taskbar, run as administrator, all that, I want to pin it to taskbar just because I want a quick way to get to it. Okay, but go ahead and click Visual Studio 2019, and as soon as it loads here, ooh, that's neat. That's a new, that is a new graphic. I like that. And it is still loading. And this could be because it's the first time I'm loading it here. As soon as it pops a window up here, I will switch over to it. So, I don't know, this is taking what, a minute, maybe 2 minutes. Okay, and there we go. So now I have what I always call in class the sign-in screen. So let me go find it real quick. And there we go, transferred over. Okay, so this is what you'll see first. It'll say, you know, connect to all your services, blah, blah, blah. What you want to do is you want to sign in, because you want to sign in with your Ivy Tech email, okay? And so I'm going to go ahead and click it. Now, I believe it's going to take me, as soon as I type in my Ivy Tech username, which is my email, it's going to redirect me to the Ivy Tech verification portal and verify that I'm connected to Ivy Tech. So there we go. So I already have an account on here, and so I'm going to go ahead and use this one. Excuse me. If you don't have this pop up, you should be able to use another account, and make sure that you use your ivytech.edu. Whatever they assigned you for school, that's the one that you need to use, because we have an agreement with Microsoft. Somebody does. And so we have access to this through the school. And this is the way they verify you're a student and that you can use it, is you have to use your ivytech.edu email. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this, and that's my account. And I've already got, you know, email and stuff set up on my computer for my Ivy Tech account. So if you have Outlook running on your computer and you have your Ivy Tech email there, then you will be able to do just what I did. But if you do not, then you'll have to specify that account. Okay. So now this is going to create the environment. And this only happens on the first load here. That's why I'm going through this, so you know what to expect. Okay. And so now it's popped up a different. There we go. Okay. So it says open recent, or it's got all these different things that you can do. Go ahead and choose create new project. Okay. Let's see what happens here. So we have a choice of empty project, or console app, or desktop wizard, or Windows desktop. We've got all these different choices. Okay. So we want to choose empty project. We want to start from scratch with C++ for Windows, okay? So we don't want anything preloaded into here. If you do the console app, it's automatically going to put some stuff in there. We want a console application, an empty project, okay? So select that up there and then click Next. And go ahead and give your course or your give it a name. You can change this location if you don't want to store it here. You can store it on your USB drive. You can store it on your hard drive. Doesn't really matter where. Just make sure it's accessible. Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and let's see here. I'm gonna leave it where it is, and I'm gonna choose to call this my first project. Okay. Notice how when I name this, I'm not just naming it anything. I'm naming it something that resembles what I'm trying to do here. And this is my first project. All it's going to do is say hello world or something similar. I might play around with cout for a minute. But right now it's just my first project. Notice that I capitalize the first letter of each part of the name here and I push it all together. All right, this is kind of standard practice for this. You don't have to do it, but I was always taught for the project level, everything is capitalized, and then at the file level, you start with the second word if you have multiple words in your file name there. Okay, that way you distinguish between the two. So that's up to you. Call it whatever you want. I'm going to go ahead and say create. And this should bring up my programming environment. It's thinking really, really hard. Excuse me. Still confused. There we go. Like I said, this might be taking so long to load because I've got other stuff going on in the background. So yours may load quicker than this if you don't have things going on, if you don't have other apps open. Okay, looks like it's ready. So you're going to flip over. I apologize for all this dead air. I thought it would go quicker than this, creating this first one. But no. Okay, I'm going to pause for a minute. All right. Well, that didn't go smooth. I had to restart the program. And so I went up and hit the little X in the right-hand corner up at the top. It said, do you want to close the program, restart the program, or whatever? I chose restart the program, and so now it appears to be working. Okay, so there's my empty project shell, my environment. I haven't added anything yet. We always add a source code file. All right, so you always have to do that if you're gonna program in this. So over here at my first project, if you select it, if you right click, you should be able to say, let's see, where is it here? Add new item, and you're going to want to add a .cpp file. That is the source code file for all of C++. If you do objects, that's where you use header files, but we are going to do .cpp files, source code files. Okay, so typically, if we were doing this outside of Zybooks, I would tell you to name your source file something that resembled what you were trying to do. So if this is Lab 4 and like maybe it's some type of a financial calculator, right, that you're supposed to design. And so you might call it financial calculator or you know, something along those lines. something that represented what that source file is doing. However, when you submit your work to Zybooks, it always asks for it in source.cpp. This is the default name right here. So if you just get in the habit of just using the default name for your .cpp file when you go to do your labs for Zybooks, then you can easily upload them to be graded. Excuse me. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and add that as a default. So source.cpp. And there we go. You see my project tree over here. It's going to appear underneath. It should appear underneath if I expand this. And if I expand the source file. Okay. So there we go. And so that's the other way you can get to it too. If you already have this all exploded here, you can right click on source file and then say add new item there as well. Okay, so that's the other way to do it. All right, so comments. Well, first thing I always do, and I'm going to make this way more visible, I always put my name at the top of every program. I always put the date. It's midnight right now. It just turned to 11, so we have class here, what, in 8 hours, so 11 June 2020. And then here is where algorithm goes. Okay, so sometimes that's just copying and pasting what Zybooks tells you to do, right? It'll give you a description of what the lab is supposed to be about, and then so you can go over to Zybooks, copy that, select it on the screen there, copy it, and then paste it directly into the comments up here so that you can, for one thing, you don't have to keep going back and forth between this screen and what Zybooks is telling you to do, okay? All right, so all I'm going to do here in this first one is I'm going to print the message. Whoops, forgot I had my caps lock on. That happens. Print the message. Hello world to standard output. Okay. So that is, I'm only doing one thing, so that's enough for what I'm doing. But you would have multiple lines here. It could be multiple paragraphs. If you have to take 20 lines to explain what you're doing, I'm perfectly happy with that. You can't have enough comments for me, all right? That may not be the case with every professor, but I will never say to you that is way too many comments, okay? Now, if they're comments that don't add to what's going on and, it's just kind of fluffy, then yeah, I would say, don't include anything that you don't need, okay? But everything that's relevant, that you can't write enough about it, okay? So comments are super, super important. So all I'm doing here is print the message hello world to standard output. Okay, let's see what that means. So I'm going to pound include this library called IOStream. Okay, this allows us to use cin and cout, which are two objects that are in the IOStream library. And one of them allows us to write to standard output very easily, and the other one allows us to accept input from the user through the keyboard. Okay, so if we ask them for a character, or if we say type your name, or we say what was the score of exam 1, and you type in your numbers and then hit enter. CN allows us to accept that information from the user, and then we can manipulate it and then perform some calculation or report some result. Okay, so if you want to, for one thing, since we're going to talk about comments here, I guess I'll back up and say you don't have to put the double / every time for the comments if you don't want to. Some people like to do this. I'm going to get rid of all these. So the alternate way to do this is to say /*, and then however many lines you want can be added to this, and then at the very, very end you say */. And so everything between those two markers, the /* and */ up here, right? All of that is commented out, so you don't have to do the double slash over here, okay? if you want to comment on the same line that's going to be executed by the compiler, but you don't want it to interfere with the execution, you can off to the side here do the same thing, okay? And say, this allows us to use cout and cin, okay? And then we always say using namespace standard, okay? And now we can get into our main function. Now, sometimes you'll also hear me refer to this as the main program, okay? I'm really talking about the same thing. I use those interchangeably a lot, okay? But what I mean by that is what we kind of went over in the Zoom lecture, where I have, oops, not that. I have int main, and then down here I have my open curly brackets and close curly brackets. And the nice thing about Visual Studio, as I zipped right through that, is when I type an open bracket, curly bracket, it automatically puts the pair in there for me, because it knows one of the most common mistakes in programming is forgetting the closed parenthesis or the closed bracket or the closed square bracket of an open bracket, okay? So it automatically says, okay, you're going to need one of these anyway. If you want a left bracket, you have to take a right bracket. Or if you want an open bracket, you have to take a closed bracket. Now, if you don't want it, obviously you can come over here and delete it. But it's really nice. Even if you do the parentheses, if you do the curly brackets, it automatically adds a pair, right? So, like I said, Visual Studio goes out of its way to make this easy for you. So there we go. All right, that's the general structure of every single program you're going to write right here. Here's the stuff at the top. Here's who I am. Here's the date that I did this. Here's the preprocessor directives and the library inclusions. Maybe I also include the string library at some point, or I do CMath or something like that. So I pound include all my libraries that I'm going to use. I'm not going to include all of them, though, because I don't want to unnecessarily make this program any bigger than it needs to be. Okay, I'm on some level, I have to be concerned about space, especially if we're manufacturing something and we want to make it as cheaply as possible, or we want to save some costs. There's no reason to add a bunch of extra library that needs memory to operate, okay? And so if we can pare that down, then we can utilize our resources somewhere else. So this is the generic structure, I would say, the baseline for all the programs you're going to write. And so anytime you have code that's between these curly brackets, that's called, there's some type of a statement there, okay? And, you could also call it the main body of code, all right? So typically the structure goes like this. At the very top of the program, I always say something like declare and define, or sometimes I'll say declare, and I've gotten into this habit for the last couple of years, and initialize, variables and objects. But we're not going to be doing objects, so I'm just going to say declare and initialize variables, okay? So if you need to store a floating point value that's got a decimal, or if you need to store an integer, or if you need to store a character, you want to declare all that stuff at the top so that you can then use it underneath. Okay, if you start trying to use a variable name and then you declare it after, it's going to throw a fit because it wants it declared before it's used. So typically we just put all of that stuff at the top, and so I'll just create a couple of variables here, int. And remember, when I use var1 and num1, those are awful variable names, but I'm not really doing anything here. I'm just showing you how it works. So int var1 equals 8. Okay? And then maybe I need another one, the floating point value. Okay? And this is num1, and that one I set equal to 3.14. Okay? And then maybe I have a character, and maybe it's the grade that you got on something, and I set that equal to a single character. Okay? So there are cases where you wouldn't want to necessarily initialize a variable, and there's probably a case, I can't think off the top of my head, but there's probably a case to be made somewhere for not not initializing these variables. So what happens here is everything on the right side of the equation, so this over here is assigned to what's on the left. So you take what's on the right side of the equation and you plug it into this memory location, wherever this is in memory, and that's what gets stored. Okay, so whatever hexadecimal memory location this is at, it's got the number 8 stored inside, and it knows the data type of that information is an integer. So this has to be a whole number. Okay, and so when we start talking about doing mathematical operations with integers, you'll see that integer math is not the same as regular mathematics that you've grown up with. Okay, but just for now, know that we can assign an integer value. I could even make that 80. Doesn't matter, 800. As long as it's a whole number, that's what will get stored into this var1, wherever that is in memory. Notice that when I'm done with my statement, I have a semicolon, okay, to indicate to the compiler that I'm through. The next thing I have is I'm going to create a floating point value, a floating data type, and I'm going to store it in memory location num1, and the value I'm assigning to it initially is 3.14. Now, if you don't initialize a variable, it will throw in some large, ridiculous negative number. It's like negative 8 billion or something, or 85 billion. It's some default number that it throws in there, okay? So even if you just wanted to assign something like, how about long, or how about, let's do double, and this is num2, and I set that to 0.0, okay? So even though I'm not really assigning it a value, so to speak, I am, because I'm at least giving it a 0 instead of having it default to that big negative 8 billion number, whatever it is, okay? So there we go. So there's 4 variable declarations here, and I've also initialized them, okay? So if I was just going to declare one, I guess I could do another int var2, okay? And then right now it's going to have this, negative 8 billion when I run it, okay? So there we go. So there's some variables that I've just declared. I'm not really going to use any of them, okay, but I just want to show you the process. So we get all that out of the way up here. The other thing that you're going to want to do is you want to, at least this is what I like to do. So this variable stores the number of exams, okay, and we say that this number is used for pi, okay? So we say off to the side here what each one of these is doing, okay? We're using this because we need somewhere to store the number of exams that we're going to ask for. Now, obviously, I'm not really doing this. I'm just walking you through that, okay? So here, this number is used for pi. This one is, who knows what this is? This is average test score. So now we have some place to store that, okay? Now, underneath all my variable declarations, okay, I'm going to say, the first thing that I'm going to do, the only thing I'm going to do is I'm going to print the message, hello world, to standard output. I'm actually going to come up here and just grab that and Control-C and come down here and say Control-V and just copy and print it, okay? Now, when you write a cout statement, it's always cout, and I always talk about Beyonce first, because Beyonce has a song where she says, which direction? To the left, to the left. So cout, to the left, to the left. And then if you want something displayed on the screen, you have to put it in double quotes. Now, you see what just happened right there? All I did was choose, type 1 double quote, and it automatically put the second one in there, okay? Now, type whatever message you want in between those two quotes. So, hello world. And I'm going to be happy about it and put an exclamation point. Okay? So let's go ahead and see what that happens. I'm not going to, if you're familiar with this program, you may know that when I go to try to run this, what's going to happen is it's going to execute it very, very quickly, and it will not let me see it on the screen because it's going to display it on the screen and then it's going to jump out. Okay, and I'll show you how I combat that. So let me go ahead and I click the local Windows debugger up here. You could also just hit the F5. And so what it's doing is it's now running my program. It's loading all this stuff. It's loading the stuff I told it up here. And it's building the file now, the executable. But as I said, I expect this to flash across the screen and then jump out because I don't have any way to leave it on the screen. Okay, well, we'll see. And is it going to put it on there? Yep, so there you go. So it ran it, and then it jumped all the way back to our programming environment here. Okay, so what I need to do is, let's see here. Let me move over to this other window because it's still up. And let me transform this to fit to the screen and then transfer over. Okay, so this is the standard output that's pulled up right now. So you can see there I said hello world. Now it says, you know, going through here, exited with code 0 to automatically close the console when debugging stops, enable tools, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so what it's saying here is that if we go back, here. So we come back to our program. This int main, let me explain, is a function, okay? It has a data return type. So once this code is done executing, the compiler is expecting me to return some value through this integer return, okay? So I need to put something at the bottom. So return 0 for main function. Okay, and that's all I do. Return 0. Okay, you can see that when there's a keyword, it puts it in a certain color. All right, so like all of these are keywords. That's a keyword. Okay, so when this is done, it's going to return a 0 to here, and then it's going to jump out. Okay, so let me try this again, and I'm just going to hit F5 this time. Find it. There it is. Is it going to let me do it with the F5? No, it isn't. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit the local Windows debugger again. And so now, let me come back over here. So here's the standard output. So there's hello world, and then it's giving me this suggestion again. So it says, to automatically close the console when debugging stops, enable the tools, options, debug, and automatically close. When it stops. Okay, otherwise it'll leave this up. So that must be a new feature in 2019 because normally you have to put a system pause in here, and I might play around with that and find a better way to do this because I don't like that it does all of this up here. Okay, normally I like it to just do what it's supposed to do and then flash a cursor or something like that. All right, and so you could do something like a cin. For a variable and then just have it blink, but we'll just go ahead and stick with this for now. So anyway, that's the first program, hello world. So let's go ahead and play around with cout just a little bit. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that window. And so now, this printed on one line, right? I want to now add a few empty lines after the after the message. We'll just say that. How about that? Add a few empty lines after the message. I can do this one of two ways. Okay, what we have here is cout and this is the stream. This is the cout stream. Okay, so this is an object, and it's looking for things in the stream here. If I want to add a couple of what I would call carriage returns, in other words, where you see it blinking now, if I hit the enter key on my keyboard, it takes me down to the next line, right? So if I want it to display that way with the cout object, then I just do in the stream. I use this keyword called endl, and I do it twice. So it's going to do 2 carriage returns after it displays the hello world, okay? So this is the cout stream, the whole thing, all right? And it'll just keep executing each part of this until it's done, until it sees the semicolon. So let's see the difference in the way that this is displayed now. Okay. There we go. Now I've got a little bit of space, okay, which I like. I like this stuff being down at the bottom. I might even start trying to push it down even further. But anyway, so there's our hello world, and then we have a couple of carriage returns after that, giving us a little bit of space. All right, so let's try something else. You don't have to do it with the endls. Okay, that's one way to do it. I'm going to go ahead and erase those or delete them. And then while I'm in this string right here, what's called a string literal, okay, we'll talk about that later too. But anyway, in between these 2 double quotes, all right, at the end, after my message, I'm going to put in this escape sequence called \n, and I'm going to put 2 of them in, \n. Those are new line operators, and those will accomplish the same thing as what I just did with the endl. Okay, so let me go ahead and run that. Okay, there we go. So you can see there's no difference in what I did before and what I just did. Okay, it accomplished the same thing. So that's what I love about this is, unless I tell you to do it one way, there's no right or wrong way to do this stuff. Okay, so what else should we do? So let's do something on another line after that. So maybe I just do 1 \n for this one. Okay, on the next line, cout to the left. Thank you, Beyonce. Now here I say, it is nice to meet you all, and I'm very enthusiastic again, and I give myself a couple of \ns, and then I'm going to put a little border down there, just a decorative border. So cout to the left, and what symbol? How about the carrots, like this? Okay, and a \n. So it should display hello world, and then on the next line it should display it is nice to meet you all, and then after a few lines here, I'm going to display this on the screen. Okay, so let me come back up here and run it. And there we go. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm manipulating the space that I'm allowed here in this standard output. All right, and so a lot of times when you're doing work in the zyBooks, to you it might look like everything is fine. Okay, but it's actually saying, hey, you're missing a space right here, or you don't have enough spaces, or you have too many spaces, or it does a pretty good job of cluing you in as to what is wrong with your code. All right, so I always suggest that you run it in, I guess you could do it either in Repellent, like I showed you before, or you could do it through Visual Studio, obviously. Okay, so there we go. So now I'm manipulating the output here, and yeah, you can make whatever messages you want. You can make designs. You can play around with cout a lot, and just see what you come up with. Okay, so let me come back to our Visual Studio now. And is there anything I could do with this up here? How about I'm going to ask a question here. Okay, and then I'm going to get an answer, and then I'm going to say this. In my first line, I'm going to say, How old are you? Question mark. And so I have one of two ways that I can answer this, okay, with my CN object, because I need information from the user now. So remember, cout is to display a message to the user or to report values. It's a way to communicate with the person that's sitting in front of the program, okay? So for CN, the computer program will sit and blink a cursor until it gets the data that you put in through the keyboard, okay? Now, I can ask that off to the side here, okay? And in which case, I would do this. Let me show you how that works first, okay? So it says, how old are you? I'm going to put a couple of spaces in between the blinking cursor and the question. It's off to the side. And so underneath that, I'm now going to say CN. Now, this one, it's the opposite of Beyonce. It's to the right, okay? And I'll just use var1, okay? I can use any of those variables up there that I want, but I'm just going to use var1, okay? So what will happen is this will display on the screen, and it will blink a cursor over here to the right. And it's waiting for you to put an answer in so that it can be stored in this var1, okay? Now, after that happens, I want to display it on the screen here, and I'm going to say, you are, and then I'm going to end the stream, and notice where I went ahead and I didn't say you are and then my double quotes. You have to program in how this looks. So if you want a space after this, make sure you put the space in. Okay, so now I come to the next part of the stream here. I'm going to repeat this back to the user. And so if you're going to display a variable back to the user, you don't put it in double quotes. In the stream, what's nice is you just put the variable name, okay? And it'll plop it right in behind this space here, okay? And so now I want to say, you are this many years old, okay? So now I need another string literal on this other side, okay? And so over here, after the, let's say it's 21, okay, the user enters 21. So you are 21 space years old. Okay, you have to think about the formatting when you do this. And I'm going to go ahead and give myself a couple of backslash n's there to give me some space. Okay, so all that's going to happen here is I'm going to actually do the comments so that you can see this. So ask the user how old they are. Store result in var1. Display information back to user. Okay, so it's not doing much. We're asking how old they are. They tell us how old they are, and then we repeat that back to them. Okay, so there's nothing complicated going on here. But let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. So go ahead and local Windows debugger. And as soon as this comes up, all right, so there we go. So now we're interacting with it. Okay, so it says, how old are you? Notice where the cursor is blinking. All right, you can see over in the code, right? I pointed this out a little while ago, but you can see over here in the code, I put those spaces in right here. Okay. So let's go back to the standard output now, and let's interact with it. So how old are you? I'm going to say, well, my age, because I am now 41. Enter. Okay. Now, when I do that, it goes ahead and executes the rest of it, and now it's done. Okay, so it says, how old are you? 41. Underneath, we said, you are 41 years old, right? Now, what if I would have left out those spaces? Let me show you what would happen. So we come back to the code. After we get rid of this, come back to the code, and I forgot to put the space in here, and I forgot to put the space in here. Okay, so now let's see how that looks. Okay, so now it says, how old are you? So far so good, looks the same. 41. Oh no, see how it crammed it all together here? So you have to be very particular about your formatting, and you have to get your spacing right. And sometimes it's going to take 4 or 5 or 10 different iterations of this where you run it and run it and run it, and you keep debugging your program and making it better. So let me go ahead and make my adjustments in my code, put those spaces back in. So I need to put the space back here and put the space back here. Okay. So I think that should take us through the operation of CIN and COUT briefly for the moment, and using this for the first time. I didn't plan for this to be a long video, but it ended up being, 40 minutes. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and stop here, and hopefully this helps. Thanks.